Great, thank you so much. Thank you all for being here. Good evening, and welcome to Game On, Incredible Learning Experiences, presented by Reinvent the Classroom. We're in collaboration with HP, Digital Promise, Intel, and Microsoft. I'm your host, Stephanie Pout-Stevenson. I'm Project Director for Reinvent the Classroom, and I'm joined by co-host Kristen Palazzolo, Project Manager, and Stanley Berry, Educator Engagement Associate with Digital Promise. At Digital Promise, our mission is to accelerate innovation in education to improve opportunities for all learners. This means closing the digital learning gap not only in access, but also in participation and powerful use. Digital Promise invests at the intersection of three stakeholder groups: educators, researchers, and developers. Because we know that to realize technology's full potential, we must focus on amplifying human capacity. Educators must have every possible tool and resource to engage and motivate and personalize learning for their students. Developers need to be informed by education research and be supported by connections with practitioners so that they can design products that solve salient challenges and improve student outcomes. And researchers must evolve new methodologies that produce results in a way that match the speed of technology. To accomplish these goals, we believe in the power of networks, the sharing of stories from the field, support and investment in research, and an engagement in lifelong learning. Our networks bring together education stakeholders in critical conversations about pedagogy and educational equity. One of those networks is our Reinvent the Classroom program. In collaboration with HP, Microsoft, and Intel, Digital Promise brings together educators from across the US and Canada in our HP Learning Studios, HP Spotlight Schools, and our HP Teaching Fellows. The schools and educators in this network exemplify Digital Promise's principles of powerful learning. These principles are built upon decades of learning sciences research, and they guide educators in the design of learning experiences that engage the hearts and minds of learners. These learning experiences provide opportunities for students to deeply engage in their learning while using technology in ways that contributes to closing the digital learning gap. Powerful learning means that learning is personal and accessible. It's authentic and challenging, it's collaborative and connected, and it's inquisitive and reflective. These sets of principles do not work in isolation, but they're synergistic and mutually supportive. So now it is my pleasure to introduce our co-host, Nick Shiner, who is a project director on the Learning Experience Design team. We've been chatting with Nick and our panelists, just getting started here, and I know that we are all in for a real treat tonight. So with that, it's my pleasure to introduce Nick Shiner.
Thank you so much, Stephanie, and thank you to everybody for being here. Thank you to our panelists, my colleagues here at Digital Promise. We have a really exciting night in store for each and every one of you. I'm going to go ahead and do introductions for the folks who are going to be joining us for the conversation tonight. But rather than me introduce them, they're all far more important and talented than I am. So I'm going to turn things over to them. We'll start with Lisa and go down the line because I want to make sure I don't miss anything about the incredible things that they're doing. So Lisa, we'll start with you.
Okay, hello. My name's Lisa Gustinelli. I'm an HP Teaching Fellow. I'm a Director of Instructional Technology and Innovative Design at St. Vincent Ferrer School in Delray Beach, Florida. I'm also an adjunct professor at Florida Atlantic University, where I teach educational technology as well. And I'm just really happy to be here.
And we're so excited to have you here. Thank you so much, Lisa. On to Angelique.
Hi, everyone. My name is Angelique Giannis. I am a high school English teacher in San Diego, California. I also run our competitive and casual gaming clubs after school, and I am a NASEP Scholastic, or I was a NASEP Scholastic mentor. Now I am a NASEP community leader.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And for those of you who aren't aware, NASEF is the North American Scholastic Esports Federation, working directly with schools and educators on esports in education. So thank you again, Angelique. Bradford, you're up.
I have to unmute my mic there. Hello, everyone. I am Bradford Harris. I am the Director of Learning for TextEF, that is the Texas Scholastic Esports Federation. I am also a NASEF Scholastic mentor, and I am also an education strategist for FHI.
Awesome.
I live in Spring, Texas.
So we're all spread all over the place tonight. Thank you so much for being here, Bradford. Chris?
My name is Chris Aviles. I like to say that I'm a recovering high school English teacher, and now I teach middle school STEM. I also started the first middle school esports team in the country about 4 years ago. And since then have grown my team into a state league that has about a third of the teams in New Jersey playing. On top of that, I have been using games and game-based learning and gamification and esports in my classroom for about 7 years. So I'm excited to share all my mistakes and help you from making them too.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. I didn't know the thing about the first middle school esports in the country. That's pretty phenomenal.
Buddy.
Yeah. And then last but certainly not least, Christopher Turner, I'd love to hear from you.
Yes, sir. My name is Christopher Turner. I'm the general manager and head esports coach for Southern University Laboratory School, which is a pre-K through 12th grade school where we implement esports and gaming. And I'm also the coordinator for Southern University Law Center's Mixed Reality Virtual Innovation Gaming and Esports Institute. And yeah, from Baton Rouge, Louisiana, glad to be here.
Awesome. Again, thank you, Christopher. Thank you to all of our panelists again for being here. Thank you to our guests as well. As Mike Washburn just said in the chat, this is the A team. We are so fortunate to have the folks here and their time making sure that they're sharing incredible information with all of you so that you can learn more about gaming and education. So before we get started, the one thing I'd love to do is just do some level setting with some of the vocabulary that we're going to be using this evening. I'm sure there will be plenty more that will come up, and we will at any point feel free to use the chat or the Q&A to let us know if you don't understand something. We will make sure to clarify for you. But these broad terms that you see on this slide are ones that I want to make sure that we clarify before we move on. So when we talk about esports this evening, what we'll be talking about is organized competitive video gaming. So thinking of games like Rocket League, which is basically soccer with Hot Wheels, NBA 2K, and other video games that are emulations of real-life sports, physical sports, I should say. Super Smash Brothers, which is a combat game. Fortnite, which is the one that kind of everybody knows about right now. And then I'm going to go back and throw it back to Donkey Kong. Even the competitions you'd have where you'd stack quarters on the arcade machine back in the day, that was esports. There were competitive competitions throughout the country, throughout the world, as far back as when we were doing this in arcades and playing the Atari, the OG esports. When we talk about games-based learning, what we're talking about there is a learning experience within a great game framework. So for example, Minecraft Education, all of the incredible learning experiences that can happen within Minecraft Education. Throwing it back again to the Oregon Trail, thinking about all of the learning experiences, budgeting, traveling across the country, dying of dysentery, all of those incredible things that you got to do in the Oregon Trail were a learning experience. And then also I want to clarify there that games-based learning, when we talk about that, it might be learning in a game. It also might be using a game as media that's related to the learning that you're doing. So it's that idea that you are playing a game and learning from an existing game or a game that has been created specifically for learning purposes. And then last but not least is the idea of gamification. This is the use of gaming elements like points, achievements, and quests that serve kind of as extrinsic motivation for your learners. So thinking if you've ever used Kahoot or Class Dojo for answering questions correctly or for classroom management, the idea of house points, which is one that's really popular nowadays, that's also a way of gamification, gamifying behaviors that you want to see in the classroom. So using elements of games as motivation for a learning experience or for a behavior that you want to see. With that, it's now time for our first question. So again, we have a vast amount of expertise in this virtual room with us here tonight. The first thing I want to know, though, is what drove you to integrate gaming and education? How did you get started? This is something that I hear a lot from folks who really aren't clear that you could use games in education at all. So for those who are getting started with this, I know that one of the major questions they have is, what made you do this in the first place? And we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to turn things over. Let's see. We've got Bradford first. Bradford, I'd love to hear how you got started on your gamification, games-based learning, esports journey.
Oh, well, great. I love it. So my own kids who are now 19 and 18 got me into this before I was even in teaching. I would always tell the story. They would always sit next to daddy and play whatever game that they were playing on their little game machines. And they would sit there and play and act like they were playing with me, and they could barely hold let's take it back, y'all. The original Xbox controller. They didn't know how to hold it, and then I would just laugh and laugh because they never understood how to hit X and Y and move, and they would just get frustrated because they didn't know how it worked. And so I just would laugh on the side, oh, you're never gonna get this. And flash forward now, I've said it before, and everybody doesn't hate when I say it. Now I have two PS5s in my house, and they got it before Daddy did, and they play consistently, and they're pretty good at what they play. And I call them scholastic gamers. They take notes, they write things down, and so it was because of them I got into this space because I saw learning happening, not in the traditional sense, but I saw the math, I saw the science, I saw the ELA, I saw it all in one, but I didn't call it out because if you call it out to kids, and that's when they shut down and they walk away. And so I I wanted to bring it in as an instructional technology specialist, and that's one of the reasons why I got hired as an instructional technology specialist, because I showed some video gaming in my learning. And flash forward to these pictures that you see here with me working with kids in STEM Fest, and then I was a chairman for my technology conference that I was a chairman in the district for, which is actually happening at the end of this month in the district that I used to work at. And so that's how I really got started. And I did a pilot, and flash forward, now I'm sitting here talking with all of you guys. And now I work with literally people that I'm sitting here talking with right now across the country. A lot of, well, all of you in here that I really am partnering with and developing and sharing ideas with that I thought I would never do before. I started 6, 7, 8 years ago with just, let me show you a game. And now I'm talking with people across the country.
That's amazing. And for any of you original Xbox fans, that controller was so big that they called it the Duke, because it was just, and like, listen, I've got very tiny hands. I'm always the first to admit that that controller was a pain. But your point, Bradford, about the fact that like not letting the kids know, like it is that motivator for them. It is that thing that engages them immediately. And there's so much learning that happens before you even make that clear to them. So thank you so much. I'm going to turn things over to Lisa next.
Okay, well, my gaming started years ago. I know one of you was a former English teacher. Back in the day, I was teaching French and then Latin, which, you got to make Latin. Somehow you have to get Latin to be exciting for kids. And I was lucky enough that I was in a school where they were one-to-one with laptops. And I started just back in the day, they had Jeopardy, online Jeopardy game that you could play. And when I saw how excited the kids were, not only about playing the game, but what got me and then led me forward in everything that I do, even in anything that I teach, is creation. I would let them create the Jeopardy game. And they loved doing that. They loved being designers and creators. So fast forward from creating that little Jeopardy game that was a technology on laptops that they had just gotten, all the way into what I'll talk about in a little bit, which is Minecraft, and creating all sorts of games in Minecraft. And I just want to say one other thing. It doesn't necessarily have to involve this type of a laptop or technology. They could use the laptop to do design thinking and plan out their game. And an example would be, I had students create a sport, just make up a sport that we then actually played. They designed it, they wrote it all out, they worked collaboratively with their devices, but then the game was a game that wasn't even using a device. They worked on a device and then they played the sport in the school gym.
That's amazing. And hearing you talk specifically about introducing those game design concepts, what a natural way to engage your learners in something, whether it's creating a Jeopardy game or creating a sport, or actually getting in and using the technologies that we have available to us to actually do some game design. I know you mentioned Minecraft, and you can build games and things in there. So I can't wait to hear more about that in some of our questions that we have coming up next. Thank you so much, Lisa. I think we're moving on to Chris now. I love this picture with the green screen. This is phenomenal.
Yeah, I mean, and that goes back to esports, right? And for me, right, why I got into this and went down the eventual path of game-based learning and esports and gamification and alternate reality games and all these different games and game styles and mediums and modes and stuff like that was really is that was the number one way I connected with my kids, right? When I started teaching, right, I was teaching high school English, and it was funny, it's the lowest track English, and it was called college prep, right? And the nickname for that class was the Fight Club, and they put me in there probably because I'm big and I'm brown and I coached wrestling and I was able to keep the kids under control, right? But the reality was when I was building those relationships with those kids that have been left behind, right, by our education system, what we would talk about and what we would bond over, right, is video games. And that was, one of the best moves I made as a teacher was I just went out and I found a video game console and I just put it in my room. And the kids knew that they could come in during lunch and just play. And so all of a sudden now I just built this culture in my classroom of, Veal's not a bad guy. He likes video games. We can go hang out and eat, lunch and play when he's in there. And next thing you know, those kids who were so tough and, always wanted to fight and stuff like that, all of a sudden they started to soften up because we were talking about things that they were interested in. And, I was so into that idea of having been a gamer myself since I was super little and connecting with all of my kids around gaming. I started to dig into like a little bit of research, a lot of stuff at the time Jane McGonigal was doing and stuff like that. And what it turns out is, right, the kids that I was trying to reach were the ones that play the most video games, right? Our kids of color game more than our white students by, 30, 45 minutes a week. Your poorer students game more than your more affluent students, and that's likely because video games are some of the cheapest form of entertainment you could buy, right? So when it cost $100 a night to go take the family to the movies and dinner, you could get a console and a game, and you divide that by the hours you play it, and video games wind up being some of the cheapest forms of entertainment that you can get, especially now that we're pushing into the free to play, the cross play, the mobile movement. More so than ever, right? Kids don't know how to be bored. They just reach into their pocket, they grab their phone, and they entertain themselves. So, it was interesting. I was doing a panel at UC Irvine with Constance Steinkuhler, who I'm a big fanboy of, and she said something that kind of like gave me an aha moment, even after all these years of gaming. And she said, sometimes teachers, other educators, whoever get upset because we're using games to educate kids and they think it's pandering. But since when is using what kids love to teach them what they want them to know pandering, right? And if that's what engages a kid, especially a kid who's been disengaged in school for so long, it's something important, something that we owe it to our kids. So for me, honestly, gaming came as a way to build relationship with my kids, and then it became a way for me to teach them what I wanted them to know, to the point where my entire classroom was gamified, became a video game, used gamification. I was teaching entire lessons and units through games. Like when I had to do ethics and morality, I used the Walking Dead video game, right? And I don't work at that big school anymore, so I could tell nobody knew I was doing it. Totally did it on the sly. But you've never seen kids more engaged, or, when we paired text up with similar video games, or if you guys are familiar with BioShock, right? That is based on Ayn Rand's work. And so we would, play this game and then talk about the books, or we would read the books and talk about the games and overarching themes. And all of a sudden now these kids who couldn't stand English and didn't want to come to school were totally locked in. So for me, it was all about just making the connections and then engaging kids, right, in a way that's important. And I threw this in the chat a few minutes ago. One of the most important definitions when it comes to gaming in schools, I hope that people take away, is what's called tangential learning. Right? It's this idea that people will learn and be excited to learn about new ideas when it is presented to them in a context they already know, right? So if you can teach somebody, right, like Angelique, I'm going to make her talk about it later if she hasn't. Angelique does an amazing lesson using Among Us and how to teach argumentative writing. Argumentative writing has never been more exciting than when you have paired it up with Among Us. Right. And if that's what it takes to get my kids excited to do that kind of stuff, right, inspiring educators like Angelique to totally, change the way that we present things to kids, I think we do it.
I love it. I mean, there's just so many amazing points there. Like if pandering is wrong, I don't want to be right. I think that that's the approach I take. Like we need to engage our learners. And I had to smirk a little bit in your discussion of video games being one of the cheapest forms of entertainment around, because I know my wife is watching right now and she probably disagrees with that statement, but you're 100% correct. The amount of hours that you can spend on a game. And now we know that there are free to play games that literally have no cost other than the device you probably already have in your pocket. I won't share my credit card statement though. It's fine. And now we're on to Angelique. I want to know. He put you on the spot, Angelique, and you may share it now or you may share it later. But I'd love to hear how you got started in this work.
Oh my gosh. Thanks for the shout out, Chris. I appreciate you. So my story is very similar to Chris, except I'm still an English teacher and I do teach college prep currently. And for me, when I started teaching 5 years ago, I've always been a gamer. I was streaming on Twitch before I started teaching and when I was getting my teaching credential. And so when I became a teacher, I thought that I had to stop and that I couldn't be a gamer online and, and expose myself or whatever. Like the kids would find me online and then it would be weird. So I stopped streaming on Twitch and I stopped honestly playing games because I was so involved with teaching. And then once I got into teaching for the first couple months, I realized that the only way that I was connecting with those students that were super quiet or the ones that were disengaged, that really wouldn't respond to anything in English, the second I mentioned something about my favorite game being Zelda or my favorite game being Halo, which is very, it brings up lots of conversations, they would all perk up and everybody would be talking about it. And so I started looking at the things that I was teaching in my class that the kids were not engaged with, that kids didn't want to apply, for example, the hero's journey. They would not want to talk about that in the sense of a book that we were reading because, to be blatant, the books that we were reading were like super old and super boring. Like they were books that I didn't even want to teach because I wasn't interested in them. So of course, for a high school student, you don't want to use the hero's journey for a book that you don't like. So one day I was like, okay, well, let's talk about the hero's journey in the sense of Zelda or in the sense of Mario or in the sense of whatever game that you like. And the kids just lost it. Like they were like, oh my gosh, and this and this and this. And they were identifying all the steps. They were analyzing. They were doing this like deep analysis and noticing that you would never see with a novel. So for me, I was like, wait a minute. Okay, so then why not use these games as a text? Why not use these games to teach? I'm still teaching the same skills. I'm still meeting the same standards. And what more would you want than a class of students who are begging to be heard, who are begging to volunteer? Instead of having one or two kids hands up, you have all the kids hands up and you can't get them to stop talking about whatever it is, hero's journey, argumentative writing. Right now we're talking about adversity and resilience. So for me, that was a way that I just naturally started integrating it into my classroom and I enjoyed talking about it and so did they. And that was a way for my students to connect with me and also connect to English. I work in a Title I school in San Diego. I have a lot of students that come from different backgrounds. And for a lot of them, they don't really value school. They don't see the purpose in it for some of them, and they don't enjoy being there. And I think for some of that reason, it's because why would you enjoy talking about something that doesn't interest you? So that's how I started getting into gaming with my class, like in English sense. And then at the same time, once I started talking about games, all my students wanted to like play me in Mario Kart or play me in Halo or whatever. So I brought my N64 at lunch, like Chris, and I would set up my N64 at lunch and kids would come in and then I would wreck them at Mario Kart 64 because they've never like touched those controllers before. And, build your credibility. And I had a couple of students come to me and they said, hey, Ms. Giannis, we have a Wii. Can we play Smash Brothers in your class after school once a week? And I said, absolutely. And the kids would come and they would bring their Wii. We would stack up my Fahrenheit 451 books and put the Wii on top of it and then have an HDMI going to my projector that was on my ceiling. It was very fancy and very, very expensive setup we had going. And the kids would just hang out and they would play Smash. And then I I was like, well, why don't we make this like a legit club and get you guys into esports competitions? And, you know, me having a background in kind of esports, but knowing Twitch and going to TwitchCon and being exposed to this world, I just started an esports club. And it was very naive of me to say that I'm going to offer every game ever, and that I had 100 kids show up at my room on our first meeting, and I didn't know what to do with myself. And it's kind of just history from there. I have my students looking at games in my sophomore English class, and then I have students at our after school club who are organizing complete school-wide Smash Ultimate tournaments. They're going to our makers lab. They're making 3D printed trophies and painting them. They're making the promotional materials. They're shoutcasting during the event just to the students that are in the space. And luckily, I've been blessed with a huge old cafeteria to work out of. So I can house basically as many kids as I want. I had to move there once there was 100 kids that showed up to my tiny classroom because it was a fire hazard. And it's just blown up since then. I got involved with NASEF and became a fellow, and, you know, met all these wonderful people that I'm on the panel with, and got to connect with them and talk about how to build out our curriculum, talk about how to expand this, work through some of the challenges. And I was the only person in San Diego doing it at the time. This was 5 years ago. And it's just, you know, gotten bigger since. And the picture that you see on the slide here that was our first meeting post-COVID, with some of my like leadership team of our gaming club. And we had continued over COVID. We were one of the only clubs to continue successfully over COVID because we got to move over to Discord, and gaming online works very well. And it was just so funny because that picture just describes so much of the energy of that day. Most of those kids had like never even met each other in person before we took that picture. And they were just so excited to see each other. And you know, those are the students that are disengaged in school. Those are the students that are not playing sports, are not involved in clubs. They are not connected to their campus with COVID, even more so. And to come to school after being out for 2 years and already have a safe space and a group of friends is something that is irreplaceable and something that is hard to recreate in any other space.
Wow. So many, first of all, the comment on narrative structure and the things that you were teaching in games, like it just makes me think. I had to look it up while you were talking. The game Skyrim, which is one of my favorite role-playing games of all time, has 60,000 lines of dialogue in that game. You turn subtitles on, that's a reading activity right there. So thank you. And then having that amazing connection with them in that safe space that you've created for them while they were distance just made that transition so much better when they came back. So thank you. And now, Christopher Turner, what drove you? What is your driving force, and how did you get involved in this work?
I feel like my story was stolen.
Tell it anyway. We're all here.
Yeah, we're gonna go in. About 5 years ago, I was at a previous high school before being a part of the university system, and so I had a group of young men that were in my art class, and they would constantly talk about 2K and get on my nerves to the point that they were not doing work in the classroom. It was constantly, hey, what build do you have? What shot do you have? And this is myself being away from console play or any gameplay because of life, because of I'm a grown up, and so I go out and get the latest console at that time, and I start playing at lunch. I bring my console and hook my console up to my projector. I go to a store and get a big speaker to hook up to that projector so we can have some surround sound in the class, and we start having mini tournaments on lunch that led to hosting tournaments and game nights after school. And then I kind of switch over and go over to Southern University Laboratory School, and realize that here I am at a pre-K through 12th grade school that's tied to a university. I don't know if I'm going to have a big art program or graphic design program here. What can I do to reach the kids? I know where they are. Let's do it. So started an esports club, and that got some national championships right out the bat. Not gonna lie and say that we had more kids a part of the esports teams than our actual club. Our club, you know, we're 350 total between pre-K and 12, and I think our first game night we might have had close to 70 something kids. So
Wow.
it's major. Yeah, in my art room, I didn't have the luxury of getting an old cafeteria. I wish I did, but you know, it's just amazing to see that those type of activities and you know using you know different skill sets. Like you know, we're able to do design competitions for our esports jerseys or use the talent from some student that has a natural gift in photography or you know, I wish I had an English teacher like Angelique or Chris, you know, where I can lean on more and have a more holistic approach. And that's my overall thing now is to, you know, continue to create those opportunities. But, you know, but having being a part of a university is quite a feat. It's right across the street. We're on that campus, and we're able to use those resources. So it's definitely a pipeline approach to all my madness. And yeah, that's how I got started in gaming and esports at a scholastic level.
That's phenomenal. And just hearing that you now, like, your journey in this has led you to a place where now you are getting to have an impact starting at pre-K
Yeah.
is just, I mean, what an amazing thing. Like, we know that as kids are entering school, they're already gaming, they're already playing things, and being able to capture that excitement from an early age there, what an amazing thing that you're able to do with these learners. So thank you so much. We're ready for question number 2 now. So I'm really curious, and we're gonna start, I believe, this time with Angelique, because we have this amazing GIF of the work that her students did in Fortnite Creative. The question here that we have is, what excites you the most about this work?
I think just the level of engagement and excitement that I see from my students every day when I involve a game in my class is like, it just trumps everything else. I had my students during COVID when we were online, and obviously we were all struggling as teachers with kids not being engaged via Zoom. You know, you had kids go AWOL and they're just not responding to you. And for me as a high school teacher, it was all black box screens. Like I never saw kids on camera. I struggled with getting to know them. And so we had to all be creative. And what I knew was, well, my kids play games and they're playing games more than ever during COVID. So I figured out like, how do I involve this in my English class? Because we couldn't play a game really together like we used to before COVID. And we read Fahrenheit 451 online, which was a feat. It was incredibly difficult
sure.
because that book is very difficult.
Yes.
And I didn't want to give them an essay. I didn't want to make them do like a formal speech, but they still had to show me that they understood the themes of the book, that they understood the plot of the book, they understood the point of the book. So I gave my kids an option and I said, well, you can demonstrate your learning using Fortnite Creative or Minecraft, and show me that you know the book. Show me that you know what the book meant, what the message was, and what Bradbury's themes were. So I had students go in Fortnite Creative and they would come back and tell me they spent like 8 hours. Like building in Fortnite Creative is not easy. It takes a long time, and Minecraft as well. And so I had my students turn in these awesome builds of Fahrenheit and what they thought it looked like through Fortnite Creative and also Minecraft. And this student in particular, like walked me through, it was basically like a speech. They walked me through their build, they narrated, and they told me like why they put things here. For example, if you've read the book, In the book, it talks about how Montag and his wife, they like sleep on separate islands, basically to talk about how distant they are and disconnected they are to each other. And my student was walking me through the house and they said, well, I put a wall up between their beds to show how disconnected and distant they are. It's like they're in two separate rooms. And I was like, where would you ever see that in an essay? You wouldn't. Like you would from your high level students, but for me, I don't work with high level students. I co-teach with a SPED teacher. I have a lot of students on IEPs. I have students where Fahrenheit is way past their level. So to see this level of analysis online during COVID was just phenomenal. So just seeing things like that. And now that we're back on campus, if you're a teacher, you know that still getting kids engaged and getting kids in the mindset of being back at school in person is maybe even more difficult than it was online. And so this semester, I ditched a short story and I said, you know what, we're not going to do this short story. And I taught with this game called Florence. It's an indie game. And it has no dialogue, which we were talking about dialogue, but for an English teacher, you're like, wait, there's no writing. And instead, I talked to my students about how do creators of media express emotion and meaning and theme without words. So my students have been playing this game together as a class, and they've been looking at all the ways of nonverbal communication. We've been looking at colors and music and body language, facial expressions, game mechanics, and they're going to be writing an essay on how do all of these nonverbal communication pieces, how do they express the theme, whatever theme that they want to focus on. They're still going to be citing direct evidence. They're still going to be analyzing. They're still going to be writing. And I'm sure they will be much higher level pieces of writing than writing that I've seen on, a short story that we've been teaching for 20 years or whatever it might be. So really just the level of engagement, the excitement, when my kids find out that they get to design our trophies by themselves and they get to choose that, just the sense of ownership over their creations it's just so exciting as a teacher. Like it makes me excited to be in the classroom and seeing their faces when I say we're going to play a game instead of read a book, or we're going to play a game and also read some expository texts and then, connect them and synthesize. They're like, what do you mean? I don't understand. But they're just so excited and screaming and yelling. It's like 100% engagement, which as a high school teacher, you rarely ever see. So
Absolutely. And I could watch this Fortnite creative GIF over and over again because it's just like the symbolism that they were able to include, like that story about the wall being put up in the bed. Like these are just things that these are creative avenues that kids have never had before. Not in this format, not having this technology at their fingertips. And building right on this, Lisa, the work that you've done around social emotional learning with design thinking and then embedding games, integrating games with that, can you tell us a bit about that as well?
Yeah, this was something that was so exciting for me, for all the students, and the whole school. So it was a middle school class, and I was teaching design thinking. So like I said to you, my favorite part about Minecraft and the gaming is when students can design it, because then they become the owner of the product. And of course, they're going to do the best they can because it's their thing. So I didn't tell them, well, you have to do it this way or that way. But I gave them, as in gaming, I gave them a challenge. And the challenge was to think about, there's a movement for tiny houses. And so I said, well, if you had to build a tiny house, who would you build it for? Why would you build it? What would be some obstacles you might encounter? And they had to go through all these thought processes. And I had them look up some designs of tiny houses. And then I said to them, well, who do you think would need to live in there? And that they came up with, well, maybe we could do a tiny house community for some homeless people, or maybe, you know, for older grandparents who can't live on their own and they'd like to live on their children's property. They could build a tiny house on their children's property. Or, you know, perhaps I thought this was funny because this was right before the COVID lockdown, and one group came up with small pods of tiny houses for college students who were studying, you know, whatever the subject was. And it was funny because I saw that a lot of universities were doing that during the COVID lockdown. And this group of kids had already talked about it and designed it before that even happened. So here we have one of their prototypes of the tiny house that they designed, and you know, they're going through. They did it in Minecraft, and you know, they had to explain, you know, who it was for and why they did it. But here's the really exciting part. Turns out our county had a competition called Philanthropy Tank, and students were asked to come up with an idea for a philanthropy and submit their idea. And if it got chosen, they would go in front of a panel of judges, kind of like in a Shark Tank type competition, and they could get up to $15,000.
Wow.
It was for 8th through 12th graders. My group was the only group of 8th graders. Out of over 100 entries, they were one of 5 groups who got to go before the judges. And their idea was, hey, we know we're using this design thinking to solve problems. What we'd love to teach this Minecraft over at the migrant school, because we live near, I'm in South Florida, and we live near a migrant community in the rural area. And they said, what if those kids who are children of migrant workers could learn design through gaming and learn how to solve problems and then grow up to be able to solve problems in their community? That was their pitch. And they used this Minecraft prototype, and they talked about what they were going to teach those kids. And sure enough, they were chosen. And of the 5 groups, they were awarded the most money. They were awarded $13,500.
Wow.
So they created, yeah, it was, we were crying.
Yeah, I'm sure.
I mean, first of all, we didn't even think they'd be chosen. I mean, they just, other groups also submitted, and I thought, oh, you know, this is just part of the assignment, because, you know, if you give them a reason and it's going to be authentic, they're more likely also to get very engaged in what they're doing, right? Hey, we're doing this for an audience. It's not just for ourselves. And that's a big part of design. And they decided to do an idea lab at this school. They called it the Idea Lab. And the school now, the little migrant school, has an Idea Lab, and they got Minecraft. They got you know, licenses for the kids there to do Minecraft. They bought them robots. They also got them a 3D printer, because in some of the CAD software, you can see your design either as a 3D print, but you can also see it as a Minecraft 2 3D print. Wow. So you could design the Minecraft and then turn it into an STL file and do 3D prints of it. So the little lab in that migrant school is still going on. And now, you know, of course, they've graduated and they've passed this along to other students in the school who are continuing on and doing all sorts of cool designs in Minecraft, such as designing a roller coaster park. I've got other ones designing a park where when you go through, you learn about all the vegetation there. And it's just been great. It's been a great way for kids to learn.
Thank you so much, Lisa. I'm going to turn things over. Let's go to Christopher. I want to hear what excites you the most. We're at about the 15-minute mark, so I want to make sure that we have an opportunity for everyone. Go. So, okay, we got Chris Aviles. Go ahead.
No, I want Chris Turner to go. I was getting ready to hype him up.
Oh, hype him up. Here we go. Ready?
Get him, Turner.
There we go. He's ready to go. Oh, now we got the dramatic pause.
Can you hear me?
There he is.
All right, great. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
No, I think just being an African American in the space, I talk to Bradford all the time. We talked offline today. Like for me, and being a part of that community, we have lack of resources. Like I hear the 3D printer, like we don't even have a 3D printer at our school. So like the opportunities of growth and upclimbing and esports and gaming being a springboard or a gateway to everything STEM and STEAM, as far as those 3D print designs are, what is coding? How do we start like those basic conversations? And I think, you know, we're in a nation where all of that is feasible. We think big, we dream big, we accomplish big, and so for me, what gets me like really excited is to use gaming and use esports for a culture that really has lack of knowledge in the space. And so when they see activations in the classroom or they see esports rooms go up and they really fully understand the big impact of it, and then you're able to address them from a skill set or a micro credential standpoint. Microsoft has some great certifications within Minecraft and others that our students need to take advantage of, and so that's what excites me the most. It's seeing something that can impact multiple generations.
Absolutely. And your points, it ties together this question and the question about pressing concerns as well, which is our next question that we'll get to in just a few moments. This idea that the haves and have-nots in education, and this is an opportunity to make sure we do this right closer to the beginning than where we've messed things up in the past. And I know, folks, I can't express this enough. Christopher Turner right here is at the forefront of leading this work for BIPOC learners and for BIPOC communities. So I thank him for sharing that and for airing that. He mentioned Bradford as well, so I'm gonna give him a moment to speak as well.
Okay, so two things. What excites me about this, number one, I am piggybacking off of what Christopher said, is that number one, and I'll just put it out there. People like me and both Chris's, it's rare to see black and brown people, especially men in this space. I personally, when I was in the district, I had two men of color that were taking the charge of educators that were leading in the space. And so when I have students that say that I'm doing this because you're here and I don't care what game you're going to play, I don't care if it's an old game or whatever, I'm doing this because you're here. That's what pushes me to do this even further. Second, I love to prove to adults that they think that this can't be done. The first thing that comes out of their mouth is, I can't do this. Yes, you can. Everybody on this panel has a focus with students, but my focus has always been with adults. I am a trainer and I train adults. At the end of the day, that's my focus. I have to promote the pathways. I have to promote the curriculum. I have to promote the infrastructure to grown people. And I have to show them how this can be done from $1 to $100,000. And they think that it's impossible. And I say, stop. Yes, it can. Let's talk about it. And here's what this looks like. And so when I have that really critical conversation with them and tell them this is how it can be done, their eyes start to open up. I show like what Christopher has done, what Angelique has done, what Chris Aviles has done. And I say, look, these are teachers. And I even put on the forefront, these are teachers. The people that I talk to are administrators who hold the purse, who hold the money. Christopher, Chris, Angelique are teachers where I love them to death, but they don't have no power. The administrators have the power. And so, and I have to say that honestly, and I say it with love because the administrators make this move for our students and for our teachers. And so I say, you have the power to make this happen. Let's make it happen in your vision, slow and steady. So those are my two favorite things.
Phenomenal. It just the fact that like that focus on teachers is so critical, because that's the conversation. It's the reason we're hosting this right now. It's the reason that we have to have these conversations consistently and constantly, because they're the ones who can make these changes, and the sharing of ideas amongst educators is by far one of my favorite things about the space. And then last but not least, Chris, go ahead. And I'm going to have you do what excites you the most, and then I'm going to have you go straight into your biggest concern.
Sure. What excites me the most, I'll plus one what everybody said. I'll also give a different perspective. What excites me the most, we'll talk about the esports space, is the way that we can teach current technical education through esports, right? A lot of people think it stops with competitive video gaming. And as somebody who's coached traditional sports for most of their life and played traditional sports for most of their life, right? Competitive video gaming is a great stand-in for traditional athletics. And it draws a type of kid who's maybe not interested. I also run the league for the state, right? I have a third of the schools in the state playing in my league. And I just did, our DEI survey, and we have 11% girls playing in our league. We have 4% students who identify as LGBTQ+. We have quite a few students on the spectrum. And some of those students may not be interested in traditional sports. A lot of these students come out for the first time to be involved in the esports team. So I love that about esports, is it's drawing in, and gaming tends to draw in a kid that maybe doesn't have a home school connection. And we know how powerful a homeschool connection can be. But I think the other side of that is people see just gaming as the center of esports. And again, I see it as a way to teach kids the things we want them to learn. So you could do a lot of really cool social emotional learning stuff through it. But that picture you saw earlier of my girls, those are my casters. I have the only all girls casting team in the state. And for every esports player, and this is a Blizzard Overwatch League stat, for every esports player in the Overwatch League, there's something like 24 positions, careers behind that person that makes their career possible. And so
wow,
every role on my team is filled by a kid. They do the social media marketing, they do the stats, they do the casting, they run the Twitch stream, they do all the IT, right? The team behind the team, as we call it in Garden State Esports, is all run by kids. So now you're talking about, you're giving kids the opportunities to not only be part of a team as a player, but now they're also coming out, right? Half of my team, I have 16-ish kids on my team. 6 of them want nothing to do with the game. They want to come and be that extra role. They want to be, the team podcaster, the team hype video maker, the graphic designer. And so, right, I think that's a really big untapped area, is to be able to give kids real world hands-on experiences, right, with these jobs that are going to be in demand, right? You can't be serious about esports without being, can't be serious about STEM without being serious about esports, right? That's where a lot of these jobs are going to be. And so kids who go through Garden State Esports, or kids who go through their esports programs that are run similar to mine, they're leaving with a resume where they can say, like, I was the team this and this and this. Here's my portfolio of things that I have created, right? So to me, I think it's a great way to bring authentic learning into the classroom. I think it's a great way to tap in career and technical education. I will give a slight shout out to alternate reality games, which is my side obsession. If you're not familiar with alternate reality games, it's games that take place in the real world. And the saying is that, right, it's not a game. It's almost like games where you deny the fact that the game is happening. But look them up, and they're fantastic. And the reason why I love them is they give, again, the opportunity to bring real world experiences into the classroom, right? Angelique turned me on to a group called iThrive, because I was looking to get back into actually teaching with video games. And I checked out this group iThrive, and they are piloting some alternate reality games. And one of them is these kids take on the role of a state senator, of a United States senator, and they have to decide how they're going to handle, closing the borders of their state or not, over a pandemic, right? Obviously borrowing from current events. And so for kids to get like these real world kind of simulated experiences where they're in control and they're in charge, I think alternate reality games are one of those things that are just completely untapped in education and can be wildly useful when it comes to, again, right? I don't think we give kids enough opportunities to actually try and do and experiment and fail right, with things in school. So whether it's as the esports team being the caster or the statistician, or whether it's playing an alternate reality game and actually being the main character in their own story, I think that's super valuable. But I think, my biggest concern is going to be similar to, I guess, what everybody's going to say is that, right, this exacerbates those that have and those that have not. And I wish I had the answers, and I have some. I have a lot of clever ways where I'm helping schools in New Jersey fund esports teams through ESSER II funding, through Title I, II, and IV funding, through help with Bradford and his crew, finding grants for schools to be able to bring this stuff to their school. But unfortunately, like Bradford said, is most of the teachers that are into esports, we don't have the power. So we got to go beg, borrow, and steal to get the stuff that we need, right? Like Angelique and Chris, bringing our own consoles in for the kids to play, right, is the gateway through a lot of this, happening. A lot of this is, bring your own device funded by PTAs and fundraising, and basically having to go to Donors Choose or praying that somebody clears your list, which is ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous, because all of this winds up just being an investment in STEM at the end of the day, right? But, if it's fun and if kids are into it and it's gaming, some people have a problem understanding, right, how that all works. And so I think where I'll kind of take my biggest concerns past, the obvious equity issues is, I think we have a storytelling issue. I think that, when I brought esports to my old high school where I taught English, I started to try to bring esports to my school, my high school I taught it in 2011. I didn't start an esports team until 2018. It took me 7 years. And a lot of it was equipment issues. The internet wasn't there yet, right? Jersey has fantastic broadband access now, but eventually it came down to convincing the powers that be that I have no, because I have no power, is that this was a worthwhile endeavor for them. And honestly, even at the school where I taught at before and now, so school number 2, I had to convince the stakeholders by basically saying, how about you trust me? Let me pilot this, make a list of your concerns, and I will actually work all of your concerns into a curriculum in the classroom. And that's how I wound up teaching health and wellness through esports. That's how I wound up teaching digital citizenship through esports. That's how I wound up teaching bystander intervention training through esports, because it was just all the concerns that all these stakeholders had. And I basically just had to say, give me a chance. So I think we need to do a better job advocating for this. I think that we need to find a way to win hearts and minds and stuff like this. And because it's tough, if you believe that violent video games make violent kids, I could give you all these studies that disprove that, right? But, it's an emotional argument. And if you feel that way, no evidence I bring to you is going to make that difference. So I think we definitely have equity issues that we have to figure out. But I think those equity issues, aren't necessarily around gaming, but more what we value, right? Show me your budget and I'll show you what you care about.
Absolutely.
The fact that we have to beg and have our lists cleared and we have to, go out and shake the cans and hope somebody throws a couple coins at us, it's insane. But that's not something I think that we can solve. That's a cultural issue. But yeah, so I mean, that's where I'm kind of concerned is how do we do this equity issue?
That is the most pressing issue. And unfortunately, you all are so good at talking about this stuff. Like, on the plus side, you actually have addressed a lot of the questions that we already had and that we were going to have specific focused sections for. But thank you all for the breadth of information that you've provided in each of your responses. So we're going to have to move on. We want to make sure that we plug this Twitter chat that we have coming up, though. This is the information I can't express to our attendees tonight just how fortunate you are that you got to hear from the educators that are here this evening. I'm going to turn things over to the Reinvent the Classroom team again so that they can talk about the Twitter chat and any other pertinent things. But I want to thank our guests, our panelists, one more time for sharing their brilliance with all of you. And this is recorded and you'll be able to share this out in the future.
Yes, thank you so much, Nick. And thank you so much to all of our panelists. I told you that we were in for a treat when we started, and wow, has this just been an amazing panel. So we can keep this conversation going. Follow us at #ReinventTheClassroom on Twitter. And if you join us for our Twitter chat at 7 p.m. Eastern on October 27th, we're going to continue this conversation around around gaming. So we hope that you will join us, connect with our fellows, connect with our panelists, connect with us on Twitter. It has been a pleasure having you all here tonight. Thank you and good evening.